My husband said, "Choose him or me," at the wedding. I smiled and chose neither. He never saw the papers coming. My name is Renee Calloway. I'm 39 years old. I run a boutique architecture firm out of Charleston, South Carolina, 6 people. A handful of coastal residential clients, and a waiting list that took me 9 years to build. I didn't inherit any of it. I drew my first floor plan on the kitchen table of a rented duplex when I was 27, broke, and too stubborn to quit. My husband's name is Marcus Doyle. He's 44, commercial real estate, the kind of job where the suit matters as much as the numbers. We met at a property developer's mixer 8 years ago. He complimented my sketchbook before he complimented me, and I liked that about him. He noticed the work first. Or so I thought. We got married 5 years ago. Small ceremony, big reception, a house on Sullivan's Island that we renovated together, or that I renovated and he supervised from a lounge chair with a glass of something amber. For a long time, that division of labor felt like partnership. Later, I understood it was just the shape our marriage had always been. For the first 2 years, it was good. Not flawless. No marriage is, but honest, or honest enough. Then, the way these things go, it started shifting in ways too small to name. I want to be precise here, because precision is the only thing that ever protected me. It wasn't one betrayal. It was a slow accumulation of small ones, each easy to explain away on its own. The first thing I noticed was the calendar. Marcus had always shared our joint calendar app with me: dinners, client meetings, the occasional golf outing. Around 14 months ago, half his entries started showing up as busy, private. Not blocked out entirely, just private, like he wanted me to see there was something there without seeing what it was. I told myself it was a new client confidentiality thing. His firm had picked up some high-profile developments downtown. I gave it the benefit of the doubt, the way you do when you've built a life with someone and dismantling that trust feels more expensive than staying quiet. Then there was his sister, Danielle. Marcus and Danielle had never been especially close, a few calls a year, mostly around holidays. But over the last year, she started calling more. And every time she called, Marcus took it in the garage, door shut, voice low. When I asked what was going on with her, he'd say, "Just family stuff. Don't worry about it." I stopped asking, because the answer never changed and never explained anything. The clearest sign came on a Tuesday in March. I'd gone into his home office to grab the external hard drive with our renovation photos. I needed a before shot for a client presentation. On his desk, tucked under a stack of permit documents, was an envelope from a law office. Not our estate attorney. A different name. Farrow and Kessler, Family Law. I didn't open it. I photographed the envelope, the return address, the postmark date, 6 weeks earlier, and put it back exactly where I found it. Then I closed the office door and stood in the hallway for a long moment. The way you do when your body understands something before your mind is ready to say it out loud. I've spent 12 years building structures that have to hold weight without anyone seeing the load. Bearing calculations underneath, you learn to look at a wall and ask what it's actually carrying, not what it appears to be carrying. That instinct didn't stay in my studio. It followed me home. I didn't confront Marcus. Not yet. If you confront someone before you understand the full structure, you don't get the truth. You get a hastily rebuilt version of the truth, reinforced overnight. So I watched. I paid attention to which nights he came home late, which calls he took in the garage, which weekends he claimed were site visits that never appeared on any client invoice I later checked through our joint bookkeeping software. 3 weeks after I found the envelope, I called a colleague of mine, Priya Anand, a forensic document examiner I'd worked with years earlier on a contested estate project. I didn't tell her everything. I just asked her, hypothetically, how someone would go about confirming whether a document, say, a family law filing, actually existed and what it contained, without directly requesting it from the source. "You'd start with the court's public index," she said. "Family law filings, once entered, usually show up there, even in early stages. Depends on the county." It took me 4 days and 2 phone calls to the Charleston County Clerk of Court to find it. Marcus had filed a preliminary consultation request with Farrow and Kessler 8 weeks earlier, not a divorce petition yet, but a formal retainer agreement for marital dissolution proceedings. Contested asset division. He was building a case. Quietly, without me. What stopped me cold wasn't the retainer itself. People are allowed to think about their marriages. It was the second document Priya helped me track down, an appraisal request. Filed by the same firm, for our Sullivan's Island house. The house I designed. The house I'd poured 4 years of unpaid weekends into. Marcus had ordered an appraisal on our home without telling me. 6 weeks before I ever found that envelope. I sat with that for 3 days before I told anyone. Not out of shock exactly. More a kind of cold arithmetic clicking into place. He wasn't planning to leave a marriage. He was planning to leave with something. And he was doing it while still eating dinner across from me every night. Still kissing me goodbye in the driveway. Still calling me, babe, in front of clients like nothing had changed. I called my brother, Jason, the following Friday. Jason's 36, a commercial litigator 2 states over, and the only person in my family who's ever been able to hear bad news without needing to react to it immediately. How long have you known? He asked, once I'd laid it out. About 3 weeks. And you haven't said anything to him? Not yet. There was a pause on the line. The kind Jason uses when he's already 3 steps ahead. Good, he said. Don't. Not until you know what he's actually planning to claim. What I hadn't told Jason yet, what I hadn't told anyone, was that I'd already started pulling our joint financial records. Not dramatically, just methodically, an hour here, an hour there, after Marcus went to bed. I found that over the previous 10 months, Marcus had moved just under $310,000 out of a joint investment account we'd built together from firm profits, my firm's profits. Largely, since his commissions had been thin the last 2 years while the commercial market cooled. The transfers were staggered, never more than $18,000 at a time, spaced roughly 3 weeks apart. Always timed around days I had back-to-back client meetings. Days he knew. Because he had access to my studio's shared calendar too. The money had landed in an account at a bank we'd never used before, opened solely in his name 4 months prior. I didn't dig further that night. I wanted to be exact, not fast. Acting on half a picture is how you lose the whole case before it starts. What pushed everything into its next phase wasn't a plan. It was a Thursday evening in April when I came home 2 hours earlier than expected. A site visit had been postponed. The garage light was on, but the house was quiet in that specific way that means someone doesn't know you're back yet. I let myself in through the side door and heard Marcus's voice from the kitchen, low, urgent, mid-call. She can't find out until after the appraisal's finalized. That's the whole point of the timeline, Danielle. I stood very still in the hallway. Danielle, the sister, the private calendar entries, the lawyer. It all folded together in about 4 seconds. I walked into the kitchen with my bag still on my shoulder. Marcus turned, phone still at his ear, and his face did something I'd never seen it do before, a full recalibration. Mid-sentence, mid-expression. I have to call you back, he said into the phone, and hung up. You're home early, he said. Meeting got moved, I said. I set my keys on the counter. How's Danielle? She's fine. Just some family stuff. I nodded, poured a glass of water, and told him I had some work to finish upstairs. I did not have work to finish upstairs. I went into my studio, closed the door, and opened my laptop. That night I went deeper than I had before. Buried in a synced folder Marcus used for developer proposals, a folder I technically had shared access to. From a joint project years earlier that had never been revoked, was a spreadsheet labeled with an innocuous project code. It wasn't a proposal. It was a full asset inventory of our marriage, the house, both vehicles. My firm's equipment and IP, our investment accounts, our retirement accounts, each item marked with a column labeled contested, or uncontested, and a projected valuation next to each. He'd been building his case against our marriage the way I build a structural drawing, line by line. Load by load, except his structure was designed to take my house down around me and walk away with the frame. I wrote down everything, every account number, every valuation, Every date the spreadsheet had last been modified. Then I called a forensic accountant, a woman named Carla Yates I'd worked with on a client's estate dispute 2 years earlier, someone whose discretion I trusted completely. I need a full trace on a set of transfers, I told her. Joint account activity over the last 10 months, and where the money actually landed. It took Carla 9 days. What she found turned this from a painful private matter into something with real legal weight. The $310,000 hadn't simply moved to Marcus's new account and stayed there. Roughly $95,000 of it had been wired, in 3 payments, to a shell entity called Coastal Bridge Holdings LLC, a company registered 4 months earlier, whose sole listed manager was Danielle Doyle, my sister-in-law. In plain terms, Carla told me over the phone, your husband moved marital funds through his sister's LLC. Depending on how it's framed, that's not just a bad look in a divorce filing. That can constitute concealment of marital assets, and depending on the state's statutes, potentially fraud. I wrote that down and underlined it. Then I sat with my coffee going cold for a long time, the way you do when a private wound finally has a name attached to it. I picked up my personal phone, not the one synced to any shared account, and called Marcus. Renee, he answered, his voice careful. I wanted to talk about the investment account, I said. A pause, brief but audible. What about it? There are some withdrawals I don't recognize. I thought you could walk me through them. I've been consolidating some things, he said. Simplifying our exposure. I was going to bring it up. Of course, I said. Can you walk me through the transfers to Coastal Bridge Holdings? $95,000, 3 payments. The silence that followed had weight to it. That's a consulting arrangement, he said finally. Danielle's helping structure some tax planning. Through our joint investment account, I said. Not through a retainer. Not through anything either of us signed. He didn't answer that one. In the quiet that followed, I said, evenly, I'm not calling to fight, Marcus. I just want to understand the picture before I talk to my attorney. Your attorney, he repeated, and something in his voice went flat in a way I recognized, the sound of someone realizing the version of you they'd planned around no longer exists. I ended the call and saved the recording. South Carolina, like many states, allows one-party consent recording, meaning if I'm a participant in the call recording it is legal. I was a participant. Every unrehearsed word about consulting arrangements and tax planning was now documented. In his own voice, before he'd had the chance to build a lawyer-approved version of the story. The wedding, the one where he said the words that gave this story its title, came 2 weeks later. Not our wedding, my cousin Lily's wedding, at a plantation-style venue outside Charleston. The kind of event where extended family gathers and everyone's had just enough champagne to stop filtering themselves. Marcus had been strange all evening, talkative in that overcompensating way. Refilling his glass more than usual, laughing a half-second too loud at things that weren't especially funny. I'd been quiet, not obviously so, carrying 2 weeks of documentation like a weight behind my ribs while smiling for photos. It happened during the toasts, in the lull right after the best man sat down. When the room went soft and conversational for a moment, Marcus stood up unprompted, tapped his glass, and, I still don't fully understand what he thought this moment would accomplish, announced, loud enough for 3 tables to hear, that he needed to get something off his chest. Renee, he said, looking at me across the table, I think it's time we're honest with everyone here. I've been carrying a lot. And I need you to understand, I need you to choose. Him or me, this business, this firm you're always buried in, or our marriage. I can't keep competing with a company. I want to be clear that there was no him. There was no other person he was accusing me of. He was talking about my firm, about the thing I'd built from nothing. Personifying it as a rival so that whatever came next could be framed as me having already made my choice. Long before he ever announced his. The table went quiet in that specific, uncomfortable way tables go quiet at weddings. Lily's new husband looked at his shoes. My Aunt Carol reached for her water glass like it might rescue her from the moment. I looked at Marcus for a long few seconds. Then I smiled, not a performance, not cruelty, Just the release of 2 weeks of pressure finding an exit, and I said, I already chose, Marcus. Just not tonight, and not either of the options you're offering. His face did the recalibration thing again. I'm not choosing between you and my firm, I continued, my voice level. Because you already made your choice 8 weeks ago, when you filed a retainer with Farrow and Kessler. You made it again when you ordered an appraisal on our house without telling me. And you made it a third time when you moved $95,000 of our joint money through your sister's LLC. I heard someone's fork hit a plate. Marcus's mouth opened, then closed. So no, I said, standing, gathering my clutch from the table, I'm not choosing tonight. I already have a lawyer, and he already has your paper trail. You can sit back down. I kissed Lily on the cheek on my way out, told her the ceremony was beautiful, and left through the side entrance into the warm Charleston night. I filed for divorce 9 days later. My attorney, a measured, unhurried woman named Denise Okafor, moved for an emergency asset freeze the same morning, citing Carla Yates's forensic report as supporting documentation. The court granted a temporary restraining order on the investment accounts within 72 hours. Danielle's LLC dissolved itself within a month, quietly, the way things do when the people behind them realize. Documentation doesn't forget what it's seen. Marcus retained an attorney who withdrew from the case 3 weeks in, a conflict of interest neither of them had thought to check for, involving a client from Marcus's own firm. The hearing was in early September. Judge Patricia Lowe, 22 years on the family court bench, read both filings before either attorney said a word. When Marcus's new counsel raised irreconcilable emotional distance as context for the asset transfers, Judge Lowe took off her glasses in a way that suggested this argument would not be landing the way it was intended to. Emotional distance, she said, does not explain a shell company managed by your client's sister. I'd like to hear how Mr. Doyle intends to account for $95,000 in marital funds that left a joint account and did not return. He didn't have an answer that survived cross-examination. The court awarded full recovery of the transferred funds, ordered the investment account restored to joint standing, pending final division, and referred the Coastal Bridge Holdings transfers for further review under the state's asset concealment statutes. The Sullivan's Island house, titled solely in my name from before the marriage, something Marcus's own appraisal request had inadvertently confirmed for the court, stayed mine. I walked out of the courthouse into a bright September afternoon and stood on the steps for a moment. The way you do when a long structural repair is finally load-tested and holds. It wasn't triumph, exactly. It was quieter than that. The particular relief of watching something you built stay standing. Because you knew where the weak beams were before anyone else did. 6 months later, my firm signed its biggest contract yet, a boutique hotel restoration on the Isle of Palms. I designed the whole thing myself, late at night, in the studio Marcus once called my competition. Some nights I still think about that word, competition, as if the thing I built to survive on my own was ever meant to lose to a man who needed me to fail at it in order to feel like he'd won something. He didn't win anything. He just finally found out, in front of a room full of witnesses, that I'd been watching the whole time.